In this video, we're going to go over the getColumn method within this array tester class. So basically, this method returns a one-dimensional array containing the elements of a single column within a two-dimensional array, and then the elements should be in the same order as they appear in the given column. We're passed in the 2D array that we need to get the column from, and then we're also passed in an int that represents what is the column index within this two-dimensional array. And there's a precondition that this is actually a valid column index, so we don't need to check anything there. Our postcondition is that array 2D is unchanged, so when we're pulling things out of array 2D, we don't want to be modifying it in any way. All right, let's go ahead and write some pseudocode. Because we are returning an array, and that array is one-dimensional as opposed to two-dimensional, it seems like we're going to want to initialize a one-dimensional array to hold those column values, right? Next, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to loop over the column at column index C. So what this looks like is we're going to keep the column index the same, but we're going to be looking at different rows within that column to get every single value within the column. So we're going to grab the value at row X and then column C, which should remain the same, and then we're going to add it to our created one-dimensional array. Okay, once we're done looping over the column and adding every value to our one-dimensional array, remember that this method actually returns that array as well. So we're going to want to return the array as well. That should be it for our pseudocode. So let's go ahead and start writing some actual code. So initializing a one-dimensional array. So this is going to look like int, let's just call it r is equal to new int, and then we need to pass in the length of this array. And so arrays are not like array lists where you don't need to specify the size, you just keep appending to the end of the array list. With an array, you actually have to give the size up front. So we know that our size is going to be the number of values that the two-dimensional array has in a column, and we can define that as how many rows there are within our two-dimensional array. So we can grab that by doing array2d.length. Remember that two-dimensional arrays are row major, so when you call array2d.length, that'll give you the number of rows. If you had passed in some sort of index, let's say 0, this would have given you the number of columns in the first row. Okay, but yeah, so we basically just need to initialize an array that has the number of values in a single column. So then we need to loop over the column. So for this, we're going to want to do a for loop starting at 0. So starting at the 0th row, we want to go through every single row inside of our array2d. We're going to do I is less than array2d.length. Remember, array2d.length returns the number of rows, which corresponds to the number of values within a column. Then we want to go through every single row. So we're doing I++. So grabbing the value at row xc, where x, we can kind of call that I now. Array2d, it's row major, so the first value we want to pass in is that I, which is keeping track of our row. Second value we want to pass in is the column, and remember the column is going to always be the same. It's going to be that index we were passed in. So this would be us grabbing that value at array2d. Then we need to add it to our newly created one-dimensional array. We would say r at what index would we be adding this to? Well, remember that we're looping through a single column in our array2d, and so this I is also going to represent the index of our one-dimensional array. This should make sense because our one-dimensional array should have the same number of values as a single column within our two-dimensional array. So since we're starting at 0, and we're going through every single row in a single column in the two-dimensional array, we can just use that I value to also index our newly created array. So I kind of combined these into one line of code. And then we're just returning that array because we're done with our for loop. So return r. And that should be it for our code. So let's go ahead and test it out with this two-dimensional array that we're being passed in. And then we're given that we want all the values in the second column. So that would be the column with index 1. So what we would do is we would create a new one-dimensional array that has the same number of indices as the number of values in a column. So that would be, we basically allocate 4 values within this row. And then within our for loop, we have I equals 0, which is less than array2d.length, which is the number of rows. So that should be 4. So we're grabbing the value at array2d of 0, 1, which is equal to 1. So now our array looks like this, where we have that 1 in the first index. Then we increment our I, so now we're setting the second value in our newly created array, so that would be this one here. We're setting it to the value in the second row, second column, which is 4. Increment our I again. Now we're looking at the third row, first column, which is a 7. Add that to our array. We increment our I again. Now you'll notice this is going to be our final time that we add something to our array. So we're getting the value at the fourth row, second column, which is a 5. Now when we try to increment our I, we now have 4 is less than 4, which is false. So we do not continue with the rest of our for loop. And we return our array, which has the values 1, 4, 7, 5, which is exactly what we would expect, because that is all the values that are contained within the column with index 1, or the second column within array2d. If you get rid of the pseudocode, here is what our getColumn method looks like, where we're creating a new array of ints that's length is the number of rows within array2d. We loop through all the rows in array2d, grabbing the value within a specific column within each row. We grab each value within a column as we loop through each row within a specific column. We add it to our newly created one-dimensional array, and then we return that array that's full of all the values of a single column. Hopefully that helps you out with this getColumn problem. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below and I'll get back to you. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.